We make the world we live in by the way we think, by the way we talk, the way we organize, and the way we actually create, maintain, and develop our institutions. What I want to emphasize here is really the conversation bit, the way we talk to one another, because that's a critical way in which we make the world in which we work and live. And I think what the U process is really saying is that, you can have different kinds of conversations. So you can have conversations which are polite conversations, which are all very nice, but don't necessarily allow you to address issues. You can have debating conversations, which we're very used to, where people look to get all of their points of view out onto the table. And that's very useful. The limit with that is that you don't necessarily get all points of view in the room. That can be a problem with that. And that requires, in order to get to that kind of conversation, you need to have a little bit of holdback or suspension on your judgment. You don't need to be queuing up with your next opinion. Hold back, suspend your judgment. So what this is saying is that there's different kinds of conversations. Suspension of judgment allows you to move from one to another. There's another movement as well, which is moving from a debate into a kind of a dialogue. And where the first one is really about opening up your mind, the other one is really to do with opening up your heart. And that's really to do with redirecting your attention away from yourself and really putting yourself in the other person's shoes. It's extraordinarily uncommon that this is done, but it's very powerful if one can. Imagine for a moment being in the other person's shoes. One of the benefits of that is that you might get a glimpse of actually how the other person is seeing you. And that actually generates a very different kind of conversation. So you can see that the U process, its foundation is enabling different kinds of conversation. In the context of pharmacy, letting go maybe of the way we've done things before and embracing something that you've heard somebody else doing or that you think might work. And when you get into the space where you're not sure about whether it'll work or not, the emphasis within the U process is that once you have a reasonably good sense of what you want to do, you don't need it perfect. There's a principle of kind of 0.8. Get 80% of it right so that it kind of stacks up. Then try it. Have an emphasis on try and fail early to succeed early. So there's an emphasis on crystallizing your ideas quickly and prototyping the ideas rapidly, so as you know what doesn't work. Don't be waiting for the perfect answer. Try out your ideas in the real world. So that would be an emphasis maybe on the right-hand side of the U process. When you have got to a point where conversation is good, you've got to a point where the ideas are good, they're new ideas, they're ideas that your team buy into, go and try it and experiment. And that's something, experimentation is something that pharmacists will be well used to doing. One of the things about the U process is that the language is very precise, but the language may seem hard to grasp at the start. I think to trust in the fact that this is very immediate material. This is about conversing in the first instance. We're talking about it in the conversational layer. So it's about different kinds of conversations. And as I've described, you can recognize these conversations very readily. I think it does also, it is also important to emphasize that this is a practice. This is something that one practices oneself and as a team. So these are important issues to bear in mind. There are many different words that might be used other than the words maybe that I'm using on this. And certainly if you go deeper into the material and the literature that I've pointed to in the written documents, you'll find this described in great detail and plenty of case studies, plenty of examples as to how it's been applied. So one of the things to bear in mind with this is find your own way with this language. What essentially we're talking about when we talk about conversation is something we're very familiar with. There are key things to remember, however. First of all, that it is possible to have different kinds of conversations. And secondly, the key to having different kinds of conversations is in the shift. Firstly, the shift by suspending judgment, and secondly, by actually redirecting attention. And once one gets to a conversation that has beginning to sound like it's productive, then to move into trying new things, an emphasis on action. So certainly in the right-hand part of the U, a lot of the thinking from there comes from the entrepreneurial mindset.